Welcome to the third grade Monster in the City project with Mrs. King. The goal of this project is to create a drawing that shows depth. We will create depth by using foreground and background overlapping our shapes. We will also explore using contrast to make some of our parts of our drawing stand out. We will also learn about warm and cool colors and how they can affect our drawings and bring balance. By the end of this project, you should be able to say, I can overlap shapes to create foreground and background in my art. You should also be able to say, I can use contrast to make my design stand out in an interesting way. For this project, you'll need a few things. You'll need a piece of sketch paper. Any old piece of white paper will do. You'll need your good and final paper. I'm using a little bit larger white tag board for our final paper. You'll need some colored pencils, a regular pencil, a Sharpie marker, a pair of scissors, and a smaller piece of construction paper. Any color that's bright and interesting will do. On your practice paper, we will draw a building. This one looks like a basic rectangle. Nothing too fancy, but this is just a sketch. It is our practice, not our final design. Notice how I put a second drawing of a building on my paper? Nothing too exciting yet. Looks like a rectangle with a triangle on top. Now I'll add a third building, but notice how I didn't draw the entire thing. I drew part of it right on top of and over from my first building. It gives the illusion that the first building I drew is actually in front of this building that I drew third. The building that is in front is the building that is in the foreground. Foreground means up front. The building that's being covered up a little bit by the first building would be in the background or in the back. Where the first building is drawn over the second building, we call that overlapping. That overlapping gives the impression or the idea that there is a little bit of distance between the two buildings. I'll continue to draw a few more buildings to fill up my paper, showing some of them in the foreground up front and others in the background behind. My basic building drawings are about done. I filled my space wisely and I didn't leave a whole lot of open space left on my paper. Notice I didn't put too many details yet. Actually, I didn't put any details yet, like windows or bricks. We'll save those for one of the last steps before we move on. Now I'm going to have a little fun and draw a monster that's in the background a little bit. Notice how I drew his hand over this one building though, but I didn't erase this line. This line right here makes it confusing. It's hard to understand if the building is in front or his hand is in front. If I want his hand to be in front, I will erase the line that is drawn through his hand so it looks like his hand overlaps the building. And now that I've erased this, it looks like his hand is in the foreground. I drew another arm around the other side and will erase the appropriate spots as well. Now I'll add a few details to see what kinds of windows and other possible patterns I might like to add. I'm not going to spend too much time on my sketch though, because after all, this is just practice. This will help me when I go on to my final and good paper. I'm going to add a few patterns in here to make my buildings a little more interesting. I don't want to use the same pattern over and over again because that would be boring. A little variety would be interesting. Once I feel pretty comfortable with my sketch, now it's time to go on to my good paper. When I draw on my good paper, I want to draw lightly, so anytime I have to erase, I can erase cleanly without any trace of my pencil. Notice how I'm drawing a very similar drawing to what I did with my sketch. In fact, it's almost hard to tell the difference between my sketch and my good drawing. My good drawing, however, is done a little more lightly, on larger and better paper, and I'm taking my time because I really want to pay attention to detail on this. I may even make some changes from my original sketch. Sometimes I can think of different ideas or better ideas that I want to add, but a sketch is the best place to work those out first. I'll continue adding details like windows and patterns in pencil. Once I've finished my drawing in pencil, it's time to outline everything I drew using Sharpie marker. Make sure that you erase any stray pencil marks before you do this though. You don't want to trace over pencil marks that should not be there with Sharpie. You can't erase the Sharpie. Once I've outlined and I wouldn't say colored in, but maybe shaded in a few spots using my Sharpie marker, I'll be about ready to go ahead and start adding color in some specific areas. Notice how I colored the sky and my creature. I used 2 different color families for those. The sky, the blue, is a cool color. The creature, the reds and oranges, is mainly warm colors. That way there is some contrast, a difference. The creature will stand out quite a bit from the background because the color I used is very different from the background. We're also going to keep the buildings just black and white, so they will stand out from everything else as well because they won't have color. Also, that will be a contrast to the color that we'll use in the rest of our artwork. We're going to take that little piece of construction paper that we have as well, and we're going to draw another creature on here. This monster will be in the foreground because we will glue him on top of our drawing. The color we choose for this creature should be in contrast to the color that we chose for the creature that we drew in the background. The creature I drew in the background was a warm color, so I chose a cool color for this creature. After I draw my second creature in pencil, I'm going to go ahead and outline him with the Sharpie marker, just like I did with the rest of the drawing. Oh, it looks like they're looking at each other. How cute. I know I already showed you that I colored the sky and my creature in the background, but I wanted to show you what I did with my colored pencils first. I separated them by color family. So my cool colors on the left are my blues, my greens, and my purples. My warm colors in the middle are my oranges, reds, and yellows. And my neutral colors on the right are my whites, blacks, browns, and if I have them, gray. Like I mentioned before, since I colored my creature in the background using the warm colors, I chose cool colors for my creature that will go into the foreground. As I start coloring him with my greens, blues, and purples, I want to test those colors on the scraps of paper around him to make sure I'm happy with the way that they look. If you push down harder with your colored pencils, the colors will be more vibrant and deep, a darker value. If you color more lightly, letting the color from the paper come through, there'll be a lighter value and a lighter looking color. Here's my creature. He's all colored and ready to be cut out. Once I cut him out, I'm going to take my glue stick and add glue to the parts that will touch my background where my city is. Don't put glue everywhere or he'll stick to everything. When I glued my creature down in the foreground, notice how he isn't lined up perfectly with the paper. It adds a little bit of interest and lets you know that the story continues beyond the edges of the page. This is my finished monster in the city drawing. We've got warm colors, cool colors, foreground, background, overlapping and contrast, and a little bit of pattern just for fun. Hope you enjoyed the project. Can't wait to see how yours turns out.